This is the Unconventional and Aspirational Careers podcast, a podcast that helps young people to follow the path for careers that are a bit different, and jobs where it's not obvious how you get involved in the industry or what you can do right now to get started. My guest today shares her story of becoming a professional footballer and the skills needed to stand out. She's had 26 starts for Bristol City in her first season, while still studying at college, and she's also been captain of England under-17s. She's also been tipped as a potential future lioness captain. My guest today is Brooke Aspin.
Yeah, started just like 26 times for Bristol City, which is mad, I think, at my age. So something that I won't forget last season. I was lucky enough to captain under-17s in the Euros a couple of weeks ago, which unfortunately we didn't qualify for, but it happens in football. But no, I think you've got everything really.
I know you're only early on in your career, and there's obviously like a very bright future ahead of you. But I'm really interested to know like the earliest memories of you for football. Like, where did football as just a hobby start for you?
Well, it started really because my dad and his best mate started a young team, because obviously I wanted to play football and my dad's best mate wanted to play football, and this is when we were about 5 or 6. So they set up like an under sevens team, and it was all the people from like our schools around me, and we started that. And my earliest memory was really, we were unbeaten for absolutely ages, and I guess it was the parents that were going, oh, who's this girl? Because obviously a couple of years ago football wasn't as big in women's sport as it is now, and they were like, who's this girl, what's she about? And when I was that age, I was actually a striker. So the one thing I do remember is we set up a tournament, and I managed to score 6 free kicks, and I've never, like, now I'm probably the last choice to take a free kick in football, but that was probably one of my earliest memories, scoring 6 of them. Don't know how I've done it, and I don't know, but that was a highlight for me, I think.
And just quickly talk to me about the change from being a striker to being a defender. How did that come about?
That change was at grassroots, and that was quite a long time ago. But yeah, I'm going to be honest, I don't know. I think maybe it was back then when we were switching positions, and my dad must have put me at centre back for a bit, and I was like, I actually like it here. So that was just a switch.
Okay, so you started playing football pretty early, but obviously this was just like a hobby, something you did on the weekends, and maybe like you trained in the middle of the week. Was there like a moment, like one standout moment, or that it became less of a hobby and more like, actually I could be doing this as part of like my future, I could be doing this for work?
I think that really started so I played for Somerset ACC for 9 years, and I was going up the ranks, and then someone called Sarah Lawler managed to get me into the Southwest England pathway, and I went to a couple of those camps and seen all the bigger, like Bristol. I was playing for Somerset, and there was bigger clubs like Bristol, for instance, going, and I was like amazed at how I was performing at the same level as them. And then at under 16, so a couple of years now back, I decided that I wanted a different challenge, so I moved to Bristol, and I think that move from Somerset to Bristol was when I realised I wanted to become more of a job than a hobby for me, and realised that I actually had something maybe I didn't realise I had before. So yeah.
So was it something that just from playing, like someone spotted you, or is this something that you like tried to actively pursue?
No, I think it was more like one spot for me, and then certain people were like, you need to keep this, you need to, like, you've got something special, you need to keep going.
Football now is obviously part of your career, but when you started, even though you might have been like standing out in your team, do you think there's any skills or like character traits that you've had to learn where you are now, or some that like have just come naturally to you?
I think independence has been a massive one for me, because obviously I've got to do schoolwork as well as travelling, as well as concentrating on football, but also try fit in with the others, because when I first went in it was really daunting. Everyone was a lot older than me, but I think going in, take it in the stride. But yeah, independence is a big one.
Yeah, I'd also like to ask a little bit more about like, so obviously you've been captain of the under-17s. Do you always feel like leadership has been something that you've had from a young age, or is that again something that you think you've had to learn and develop?
I think I've been lucky, and leadership has been part of my traits I've had across my whole football career so far. Like that's at England we say super strength, and I think leadership is one of my super strengths.
Hmm. Okay, that's good to hear, because I think whilst you can see the skills that you've had to learn, you're also like aware that okay, these are skills that I've had that I've just like continued to build on, even though they were natural when I was growing up. And like I say, you are still very young as well, and to be able to play first team football as well. That how does that feel for you, knowing that you're still very early in your career, but you are like competing alongside people that are much older than you?
Yes, it's an amazing feeling. Like it's something that I'll never ever forget. And you get people in the team telling you all the time how, like, asking how young you are and making little jokes. But the little jokes are actually a nice gesture, I suppose, because they're giving you compliments of actually how you're so young but playing such a high standard.
I'd be interested to know a little bit more about whether it's about football in general, or maybe specifically to you because you're still studying as well. But like, what is the cost of your like work? What is the challenge that maybe fans or friends or someone like me just looking from the outside? What is like the challenge that we might not see?
I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform like to my best ability, and I think one of the things in football you just have to enjoy it and enjoy the ride. But because obviously I'm at a high standard, I put so much pressure on my performance and as well as my college work and making sure I'm on there on time. It can get quite stressful sometimes. But yeah, that's probably my biggest challenge, the mental side of things.
You mentioned the stress. How do you like cope with that? Is there any things you do to cope, or do you think it's one of those things where in the future you don't think you'll put as much pressure on yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a learning curve for me at the moment. I think trying to find different ways to deal with that stress, but obviously I'm still young and I still got loads of things to learn. So I think trying to find a certain way to deal with that stress.
We're halfway through the episode, and I wanted to take this moment to shout out my incredible sponsor, me, Jake Richings. The reason I started this podcast is because I believe that no matter what path young people want to take in their careers, no matter how aspirational or unconventional, they should be motivated and inspired to take the next steps towards that. We all know from experience, from volunteering, work experience, our jobs, connections, individual circumstances, that the path we thought we'd be on is very different to the path we are on now, even if we didn't expect that. For the last 2 years, I've been facilitating workshops and running keynote talks, inspiring students to find careers that they love, and alternate talks to enable teachers and leaders to enable young people and engage young people in their futures. That's a big part of what I do for a living. Whilst I love what I do, just like today's guest, I wouldn't be able to create content like the podcast without support of schools, colleges, and universities getting me in as a relevant voice in employability to engage students with actionable advice. If you want your students to be just like everyone else, don't look in the show notes for my email and contact details. Back to the podcast. The last question I've got written down is one I didn't want to give you a heads up on because I wanted to sort of put you on the spot a bit. But there will be a lot of young people that want to progress into the world of football, and there'll be a lot of young people that are very good but don't make it, or don't manage to progress. What do you think, or do you think there's anything special about you and your skill, your character traits, your upbringing that has meant that you are able to do this and be successful in this career when maybe other people might be struggling?
I think individually look for the bright side of life really. I always think positive, but also I think my dad has been a massive part of where I am today, and like him taking me to games, so many things off the scene to help me out, emails. But now I think it's time for me to repay him and show him what he's helped me do. If that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I just want to touch on, you mentioned that positivity, but I think that also ties into like proactivity of like you don't have to wait until you're told to do something, you just like go and do it. Can you give me like an example of how that's applied in like your footballing career of just, oh, I think I want this thing, and then just working out how you're going to go and get it?
So, for instance, lockdown was a massive part for me. So obviously we were all completely stuck with football. There was no up to me. So every day I'll go out the field, 5-10 minute walk from me, and do run sprints. We ended up setting up a home gym, and it's in the back of my mind where you don't want to slack on any of the fitness or any of the football going on. So you're constantly working and being a better version of yourself. And I think recently as well in pre-season, they're like, have a break, and 100% have a break, go on holiday, do your thing. But at the back of my mind, I'm such a like passionate person. I'll be in the gym every day, working out, doing certain bits that'll make me a better person on the pitch. So yeah, that's what I'm about really.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you mentioned as well. Like, you weren't told to go and like run in the fields during lockdown, but you just kind of went and did it. Do you think you do a good job of balancing that, like have a break side, but also I want to be like as good as I can be?
I think it could be better, to be honest, because I'm such a passionate person about football. I don't really tend to give myself a break. And if you ask any of my coaches, I think they'll agree that I never really have a break. But I've always said I'm going to have a break once I've made it. And I'm not going to, and I haven't made it yet. So I'm not having a break.
That's interesting you say that because, like I said, doing my research for you beforehand, I didn't get that impression. Is there like a certain milestone or goal that you're like, okay, once that is the thing, then I've made it?
My ambitions are really high. So one of them is I want to win the Ballon d'Or, and I know that's a huge thing. But I'd love to win that. But also, I said this earlier, I want to be in the big stage where the Lionesses are now in about 3 hours playing Austria in the first Euros and at home. And I'd love to go and do that, and I'd love to captain the side as well. And I think in the big main stage, that's what I've made it. And I don't think I'm going to stop till I have, really.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and for what it's worth, Brooke, I mean, I just from like the very short amount of time I've known you, I feel like you're successful. So even if
Thank
you
you.
get to the point where you're competing for the Ballon d'Or and you don't get it, like that, I suppose it's like give yourself permission to be like, wow, look how far I've come already, and it's brilliant to be there. Um,
Thank you.
but yeah, no, that is perfect to hear some of like your story and how you've got started. I suppose, is there anything else from you that you're like you want to share? If I just like give you a open platform.
One special tip from anyone. I've said this to like the clubs I've been to before, but it's just simple. If the person next to you has done 10 sprints, make sure you're doing 15 or 20, because you don't know where that hard work could get you. And so that's my tip of the day, really.
I like that one. Yeah, I think that applies. I suppose not just for football, but and everything as well. It's like
Yeah,
if you're working harder than the people around you, then you know you're going to be, I suppose, growing faster and getting
100%.
better
Yeah,
faster. Awesome.
definitely.
But yeah, no, this has been really good. I've really appreciated your time, Brooke.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time as well. Thank you.